The first light of dawn slipped softly across the tiled rooftops of Rome, touching domes, courtyards, and narrow alleys with a pale glow that felt almost cool against the lingering warmth of the night. In the Subura district, where modest homes stood close together, and the sense of daily life drifted easily from one doorway to the next, a woman named Livia stirred awake. The faintest breath of morning air brushed her cheek, carrying with it the gentle aroma of damp earth, distant hearth smoke, and the sleepy rustle of a city that would soon awaken. Livia rose slowly from her narrow bed, stretching her arms toward the dim ceiling as she inhaled the familiar smell of her small room. Clay walls, lightly stained by years of lamp smoke, held the coolness of night. The thin blanket slid softly away as she placed her feet on the floor, feeling the faint grit of dust, warmed ever so slightly by the earliest rays of sun. Outside, a rooster crowed, its voice muffled by the close-set walls that cradled sound in a soft, contained echo. She stepped quietly into the main room, where the small hearth waited in its corner, nothing but cold ash resting in its shallow basin. The hearth was simple, built from clay bricks and shaped with a catabula, the kind of raised surface common in homes like hers. She knelt beside it, her fingers moving with practiced ease to gather the remnants of yesterday's fire, brushing them aside until she could place new kindling in their place. Small twigs, bits of dry olive wood, and a handful of straw formed a little nest within the hearth. With a spark struck from iron and flint, she coaxed the first small flame of the day to life. The fire crackled softly, its warmth spreading slowly into the still room. Thin smoke curled upward and drifted toward the open square in the ceiling above, escaping into the sky as gently as a sigh. When the flame had strengthened, she added a few larger pieces of olive wood, their scent earthy and comforting as they caught fire. Today, like most days, she would prepare the family's meals with calm, unhurried precision. Breakfast would be small, no more than softened bread, a drizzle of olive oil, perhaps a fig if any remained from the week's market. But the main meal, taken midday, would require longer preparation. As the fire warmed the room, Livia fetched a small jug of water and poured some into a clay pot with a rounded base. The pot was old, its surface slightly blackened from years of sitting close to the flames. With gentle steps, she carried it to the hearth and set it upon a metal tripod, positioning it so the flames licked at its belly in slow, steady movements. From a woven basket near the wall, she took a handful of barley grains and let them trickle through her fingers into the water. They settled at the bottom of the pot, where the gentle heat would coax them into softening. She stirred them with a wooden spoon, listening to the calm sound of grains moving through water. The light outside had grown brighter now. Through the doorway, she saw neighbors beginning their morning routines. A woman swept dust from her threshold with slow arcs of a straw broom. A man carried a bundle of firewood on his shoulder, moving with the patient pace of someone who had made this walk 1,000 times. Their quiet motions blended into the gentle rhythm of Rome waking to the day. Livia's husband, Gaius, entered the room with soft footsteps. His tunic, loosely tied at the waist, rustled faintly as he greeted her with a nod. The aroma of warming barley drifted around them, mild and comforting. He stepped outside to tend to a small set of tools he used for his work, and Livia continued stirring the barley, watching it thicken gradually into a porridge. Once it had reached the consistency she liked, she set the pot aside on a raised ledge to cool. She placed a small loaf of yesterday's bread on the table, its crust firm, its center still soft. With a thin knife, she sliced it into modest pieces. A clay bowl held olive oil, golden and smooth, pressed from fruit grown only a few miles away. Its scent rose gently into the air as she dipped the slices of bread into it. Breakfast was simple, eaten mostly in silence as the sun filled the courtyard with soft warmth. Their young son, Tiberius, chewed his bread sleepily, his eyelids heavy from waking too early. Gaius ate with quiet satisfaction, and Livia took comfort in the familiar taste of barley porridge, its warmth easing her fully into the day. When breakfast ended, she cleared the small table and began preparing for the midday meal. This meal prandium would be light, but the preparation began early, especially in households like hers, where time was managed carefully. She brought out a shallow clay bowl filled with dried beans. The beans had soaked overnight, their skins slightly puckered, but softening nicely. Rinsing them with cool water from the jug, she felt their smooth surfaces slip through her palms before placing them into a pot to cook later. Next, she selected a few vegetables from her storage basket, leeks wrapped in a cloth to keep them fresh, a small bundle of spinach-like greens, a carrot dusted with earth, and 2 onions that carried a faint, sharp scent. She placed them on a wooden board and began cutting them with deliberate strokes, the sound of the knife soft and rhythmic. Livia enjoyed these quiet moments before the true heat of the day arrived. The room was still cool, the fire crackled gently, and the smell of freshly cut vegetables mingled with the lingering aroma of barley from breakfast. Outside, she could hear pottery being arranged at a neighbor's doorstep, and somewhere down the street, the distant calls of vendors warming up their voices for the market. When the vegetables were prepared, she set them aside. The beans would simmer slowly once the water reached a steady boil, the vegetables joining them partway through. This dish, a simple kind of pools or stew, was common in households throughout Rome, affordable, nourishing, and endlessly adaptable, depending on what ingredients a family had. While waiting for the fire to strengthen again, Livia used the time to grind some herbs with a stone mortar, coriander, and a little parsley she had dried earlier, crushed gently into fragrant dust. Some Roman cooks added more exotic spices, but such things were reserved for wealthier homes or for festivals that came but a few times each year. Still, Livia enjoyed the smell of these simpler herbs, their freshness filling the room and clinging lightly to her fingertips. As the water began to heat, she added the beans and listened to the bubbling rise softly, like small footsteps tapping beneath the pot. She stirred occasionally, letting the rhythm of her motions calm her mind. Rome, with all its grandeur and noise, existed outside this small home. But inside, the world contracted into a gentle circle of fire, clay, and soothing aromas. Later in the morning, she retrieved a small handful of salted fish from a covered jar, no more than tiny fragments, enough to add a whisper of flavor to the dish. Salted fish was a staple in many Roman kitchens, its sharp, briny scent softening once cooked into a stew. She rinsed the pieces lightly and set them on the board to await their turn in the pot. As she worked, the street outside grew busier. Neighbors exchanged greetings, shopkeepers opened their doors, and carts rolled slowly along the cobblestones, pulled by patient oxen. The soft murmur of voices drifted into the kitchen, vendors calling out types of fruit, the light chatter of women heading to the fountains, the distant rhythm of a blacksmith hammering metal with slow, steady strokes. Livia paused sometimes to listen, letting the sounds wash over her like a calm tide. They were the sounds of her world, familiar and steady, marking the passage of each day. By late morning, the beans had softened enough to add the vegetables. The pot's aroma shifted, becoming earthier and richer. She stirred in the salted fish pieces and watched them dissolve into the stew, blending their flavor gently. A few drops of olive oil completed the mixture, adding warmth and depth to the scent that filled the kitchen. With the pot simmering quietly, she began shaping dough for small flatbread. The dough was simple, barley flour mixed with water and a pinch of salt. She kneaded it on the board, her hands moving in slow, steady motions. Once it felt right beneath her palms, she separated it into small rounds, flattening each one like a soft leaf of clay. Setting a shallow pan over the fire, she waited until it warmed, then laid the flatbreads onto its surface, one by one. They cooked quickly, their edges crisping slightly, a faint smell of toasted grain rising into the air. Every so often, she pressed them lightly with a cloth-wrapped stone to keep them flat. The midday sun had risen high when the meal was finally ready. Gaius returned from his morning work, his tunic dusty, his steps tired but relaxed. Tiberius followed him, carrying a few small sticks he had gathered for the hearth. Livia served the meal in shallow clay bowls, thick stew, warm flatbread, and a small handful of olives preserved in brine. The family ate slowly, savoring the simple flavors. The stew was rich and comforting, the bread warm, the olives tangy and satisfying. When the meal ended, Livia placed the pot aside to cool and covered the leftover stew. Some would be eaten later in the day, during the evening meal, smaller and quieter than the others. Afternoon stretched ahead of her like a calm, warm blanket. The heat of the day pressed gently against the walls, causing the air to shimmer slightly near the open doorway. Livia tidied the kitchen, washing the bowls in cool water from the jug, and placing them on a shelf made from smooth wooden planks. Her hands moved slowly, her mind quiet. Later, she would collect firewood, sweep the floor, and tend to a few herbs growing in a small clay pot outside. The afternoon passed softly. The fire had died down to faint embers, leaving the room pleasantly cool. In the corner, light filtered through the narrow window, illuminating specks of dust that floated lazily in the stillness. Toward evening, when the heat finally began to soften and the shadows lengthened across the courtyard, Livia prepared the light supper. She warmed the leftover stew over a small flame and sliced a few figs that she had purchased earlier in the week. Their sweet aroma filled the room, a soft reminder of the orchards beyond the city walls. The evening meal was taken quietly. The family spoke of simple things, the weather, the neighbors, small plans for the next day. The room was lit by a single oil lamp, its flame trembling softly within its clay bowl. After eating, Gaius stepped outside to enjoy the cool air of early evening. Tiberius played with a small wooden toy near the hearth. Livia wiped down the boards one final time, her motions slow and calm. As night deepened, the city's distant sounds grew softer, a few voices lingering in the streets, the quiet padding of a dog, the faint, rhythmic creaking of a cart returning late from the market. Livia extinguished the lamp and lay down upon her bed once more, the cool linen welcoming her tired body. Her thoughts drifted to the day just lived, a day filled with simple motions, soft sounds, and the steady comfort of familiar routines. Cooking in Rome was not grand or elaborate for most families. It was an intimate craft, woven into daily life with patience, warmth, and gentle repetition. Through fire and clay, through herbs and grain, the rhythm of the kitchen formed a quiet heartbeat that pulsed through each day. As she closed her eyes, the faint scent of olive wood lingering in the air, Livia felt the slow, soothing drift of sleep settling upon her. Tomorrow, she would rise again to coax a new flame from kindling, to stir another pot, to shape another day from the soft warmth of fire and the simple nourishment it created. And the ancient city around her would continue breathing in its gentle, eternal way, wrapped in the calm glow of hearths like hers.